Tether was the largest gold buyer last quarter in Q3. They bought 24 tons of gold. Apparently, they own 116 tons of gold now. So they bought more gold than Kazakhstan, Brazil, Turkey, even China in Q3. What do you make of that new entrant? Because they're backing their stable coins with gold now here. What's your take on Tether here?
But to me, the big concern in the next couple of weeks, frankly, will be the Federal Reserve. And you mentioned 85% basically probability. That's what the markets are saying, 85% probability of a rate cut. And gold has priced that, right? Gold has priced that in. 2 weeks ago, it was more like 50-50. In fact, it was even a little less than 50% for a rate cut. But at this point, with an 85% probability of a rate cut, and with gold having already discounted that, the risk, of course...
Stop and listen to this warning. The market has already baked in the rate cut. This is a classic buy the rumor, sell the news setup. If the Fed disappoints even slightly, we could see a sharp correction. If you want to navigate these market traps successfully, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We track these signals daily.
The risk, of course, is that the Fed either doesn't cut or cuts with an extremely hawkish message, and that could see gold come down. So, as you know, in this business, we're not really in the business of making predictions as to what's going to happen. It's looking at what we think is going to happen in the context of risk and reward and in the context of what's already discounted in the market.
Adrian, what do you make of Tether? Tether is a new buyer in the market. We've just been flooded with a number of statistics here the last few days here over on X and social media. This is from a Reuters article, but I think Tether and the World Gold Council put that together. Tether was the largest gold buyer last quarter in Q3. They bought 24 tons of gold. Apparently, they own 116 tons of gold now. So they bought more gold than Kazakhstan, Brazil, Turkey, even China in Q3. What do you make of that new entrant? Because they're backing their stable coins with gold now here. What's your take on Tether here?
Yeah, I should have mentioned Tether, of course. No, very, very significant, because this is not just a new entrant, but a really significant entrance, as your chart shows and as you just said. You know, a couple of things going on. We know the Tether people, and certainly the individuals that I'm acquainted with, but we know that the Tether people like hard assets. It's not just gold that they're buying, physical gold to back their gold stable coin, but it's also gold royalty companies. They've made inroads they've made acquisitions of gold royalty companies. We can talk about that later if you want. But it's not just gold. They've also bought farmland in Latin America, in Brazil and Argentina. So, I mean, they certainly have a hard asset orientation. I suspect, and I mean, I don't know this, I suspect that given that their main business at the moment is and has been the US dollar stablecoin, where they will put money into treasuries, and of course, they're keeping all of the interest. So that's a pretty good deal for them. But as interest rates are coming down, their revenue from the US dollar stablecoin is going to decline. And so I think they're looking to diversify. I think they're looking to diversify out of that, and gold is the obvious candidate to do that.
This is a massive geopolitical signal. Tether is essentially one of the largest buyers of US debt. If they are rotating out of treasuries and into physical gold because yields are dropping, it validates the thesis that smart money is losing faith in the dollar's yield advantage.
So I think they're going to make
just the composition of assets that they have to back their US dollar stablecoins. Just to your point, I didn't want to interrupt you there, Adrian.
No.
But as you correctly said, $106 billion is in U.S. Treasury bills. As you said, that's where they're collecting the fees. Only $9 billion are in precious metals and $9 billion in Bitcoin. So I think we can agree that that position will probably get increased, or we will see it increase tremendously.
Well, we
over
might
the
see it
coming
increase,
months.
Kyle. We might just see them build up their a separate gold-backed stable coin. So you have a US dollar stable coin and a gold-backed stable coin. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But there's no question that they want to build up their gold holdings wherever they put them.
No. While we're on the topic of Tether, let's stay on the gold royalty companies that they've recently invested in as well. What's the motivation behind that? Like, maybe help us understand that a little bit, because they don't pay a dividend. It's a pure share ownership, and they have to pump more money into it to keep it afloat or to finance deals for further growth. So, what's your explanation for them to jump into the royalty segment?
Eventually, they want to consolidate the juniors. They've made and the mid-tiers. They've made no secret of that. So you consolidate a few more juniors, maybe gold royalty company, etc. But a couple of companies of that sort of size, and then they will be of a large enough size where they could try to consolidate either a Triple Flag or a Cisco, one of the top five. And perhaps eventually, just take it over themselves so they then get the royalty stream as income. Because you're right, at the moment, there is no dividend at the moment. I mean, you could change that, of course, but there's no dividend at the moment. And I don't think there will be in the meaningful future while these companies are growing and while they're consolidating. But I mean, if you get to a $2 billion, $3 billion market cap consolidated royalty company, potentially they could just take it over and keep all of the royalty stream for themselves.
Yeah, it is interesting, because the question is, like, how do we as investors play this as well? How do we benefit now? Like, how do you trade this? Are you invested in a Metalla, in a gold royalty? Do you own Elemental? Those are, by the way, the three names top of my head. I'm sure maybe I've missed one.
Yeah.
That I definitely know Tether is invested in. But how do we benefit as a retail investor?
Yeah, well, before Tether came along, of course, we were very keen on the royalty space, and we did own a fairly significant positions both in Elemental and in Metalla, as well as some others. I think at this point, I think Elemental is definitely the merged Elemental and EMX, but Elemental, which now trades NASDAQ, by the way, Elemental is definitely one to own, because whatever happens in the space is going to resolve to the benefit of Elemental eventually. For Tether, and certainly at the moment, and I have no insight in, I'm not best buddies with the guy, and I don't sit on the Tether board, but this is my impression. Elemental is going to be their sort of flagship, at least for the foreseeable future. And so the consolidation will be Elemental acquiring other companies and merging them into Elemental.
Here is the strategy in plain sight. Tether isn't just buying stocks, they're building an empire. By using Elemento as their vehicle to swallow up smaller companies, they are trying to create the next mining giant from scratch. For investors, this means the consolidation phase has officially begun.
And I think, whatever short-term movement there might be, if they decided to buy XYZ at a premium, maybe the Elemental stock price goes down while the other one goes up. But that's all temporary. I mean, I think over the next year or two or three, Elemental is definitely going to benefit from their association with Tether. So that's the first one. Then do we look at possible acquisition targets? And clearly, even before Tether made their recent announcements of share interests in Groy and in Gold Royalty and in Metalla, even before that, there was a lot of speculative buying in those names and in others, frankly, from people saying, oh, well, this is going to be the next target. The Tether people are clearly not stupid. If you look at priorities, I think getting big and doing it in a hurry seems to be more important to them than discipline and buying at a great price. But having said that, if you look, for example, just look at Metalla. Metalla ran up in September and October, and then Tether came out with their announcement that they had acquired 5.5% in the market. And when you look at it, they started buying right at the end of August, and so an awful lot of that run-up in the stock price was simply Tether buying. So they were pushing the price up on themselves. Having made that announcement, frankly, I was surprised that they didn't sort of go very rapidly to try to get to 10 and then 19.9%, but they didn't. And as far as we know, they haven't bought any since. In the US, once you've got to about 5% target and you're doing a 13D, which is the activist filing, then you would have to report, I think it's within 10 days, but it's not. It's within 4 days or something very short. You have to announce if you have a 1 percentage point change up or down. So whether they bought some or not, they haven't bought over 1% of the company since then. So essentially, they're still at 5.5%. I was a bit surprised that it didn't push much higher immediately. But it could be Tether playing a sensible game, which is we've just reported 5.5%. Let's not just now double the stock price on ourselves. Let's wait a little bit, and maybe they're going to come in later. Anyway, the point is, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but from the point of view of investors, I think, for example, a company like Metalla is a very, very good company anyway, and it's very undervalued. People will say, well, did you look at the cash flow? Everything I see says it's one of the more expensive ones. Well, it's one of the more expensive ones on a cash flow multiple, but on an NAV, it's one of the cheapest. And they've got long duration assets. So their NAV is even understated in my view. So on an asset basis, it's very, very undervalued in my view. To me, the possibility of Tether buying more and wanting to acquire it is icing on the cake. It's certainly not why I'm buying that company. And then you have to look at, does Metalla want to sell to Tether? I don't think they do. There's obviously a price at which, shareholders would sell, but I don't think they want to.
This is a crucial distinction for speculators. Not every company wants to be bought. He is suggesting that while Metalla holds great value, Gold Royalty Corp might be the easier target for a takeover. If you're betting on a buyout premium, you need to know who is actually willing to sell.
Gold Royalty, on the other hand, and there's one or two others, I think would be happy to sell at with the right terms, of course, but would be happy to sell to Tether. And maybe those are the ones to focus on purely as a speculation on a Tether takeover. So Gold Royalty would be the obvious case. Tether's got 8.5% of I think it's 8.5% of Gold Royalty. Gold Royalty's got, and again, nothing's happened since that announcement, right? So they haven't increased it or decreased it meaningfully since then.